The green-skinned orc warrior stood trembling in the doorway of the small farmhouse, blood dripping from a gash across her ribs. And in a motion that would change both their lives forever, she unsheathed her sword and laid it at the feet of the human man who had opened the door. Sebastian York had been stirring a pot of stew when he heard the heavy knock, and now he stood frozen, wooden spoon still in hand, staring at the weapon gleaming on his threshold. The orc woman swayed slightly, one hand pressed against her wounded side, her amber eyes fixed on him with an expression caught somewhere between defiance and desperation. Her dark hair was matted with sweat and dirt, tied back in a warrior's braid that had come partially undone. Small tusks curved up from her lower jaw, and her pointed ears were pierced with simple iron rings. "Please," she said, the word seeming to cost her greatly. "I surrender to your mercy. I will cause no harm." Sebastian's mind raced. He was a former soldier himself, retired to this frontier farm after 5 years of fighting in the border wars. He knew what the sword at his feet meant. In orcish culture, laying down one's weapon was the ultimate gesture of submission, of trust. It was not done lightly. An orc warrior without her blade was vulnerable in every way that mattered. He looked at her face again, really looked, and saw past the green skin and tusks to the exhaustion etched in every line, the pain tightening her jaw, the fear she was trying so hard to hide. She could not have been more than 20 summers, and she was bleeding on his doorstep. Sebastian bent down slowly, his movements deliberate so as not to startle her. His fingers closed around the leather-wrapped hilt of her sword. It was heavier than he expected, perfectly balanced, with orcish runes etched along the blade. A warrior's weapon, well cared for and well used. He straightened, and the orc woman's eyes widened slightly. She clearly expected him to keep it, to hold it over her as leverage or to cast it aside in disgust. Instead, Sebastian stepped forward and extended the sword toward her, hilt first. "Keep your honor," he said quietly. "You will need it, and I have no right to take it from you." For a long moment, she simply stared at him, and he saw something shift in her amber eyes, a crack in the armor she wore as surely as any warrior wore steel. Then her hand reached out, trembling, and closed around the hilt. The moment her fingers touched the weapon, something in her posture changed, straightened, even as she swayed again from blood loss. "Inside," Sebastian said, stepping back and gesturing. "Quickly, before you bleed out on my porch." She hesitated only a heartbeat before stepping over the threshold, and Sebastian closed the door firmly behind her, already mentally cataloging what he would need. Clean water, bandages, needle and thread if the wound was deep enough, whiskey for cleaning and for numbing. "Sit," he instructed, pointing to the sturdy wooden chair near the fireplace. The orc woman moved to it, keeping her sword in one hand even as she lowered herself carefully into the seat. She watched him with wary eyes as he moved around the small kitchen, gathering supplies. "What is your name?" Sebastian asked as he set a basin of water on the table beside her and began rolling up his sleeves. She was silent for a moment, clearly weighing whether to answer. "Petra," she said finally. "Petra Kendrick, of the Iron Ridge clan." Her accent was thick, the consonants harder than a human would make them, but her command of the human tongue was good. "Sebastian York," he replied, meeting her eyes. "And I need you to let me see that wound, Petra. I cannot help you if you bleed to death while we exchange pleasantries." A ghost of something that might have been humor flickered across her face. Slowly, she leaned her sword against the chair within easy reach and began to unfasten the leather straps of her armor. The breastplate was battered and scored with battle marks, and Sebastian helped her lift it away carefully. Beneath, she wore a simple tunic that was soaked with blood along her left side. "May I?" Sebastian asked, gesturing to the fabric. Petra nodded stiffly, and he used his knife to cut away the blood-soaked material, revealing the wound beneath. It was a sword cut, deep but clean, running from just below her ribs across her side. It would need stitching, but it had missed anything vital. "You were lucky," Sebastian observed, dipping a clean cloth in the water and beginning to clean away the blood. "Whatever blade made this was sharp. A cleaner cut heals better." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Petra said through gritted teeth as the cloth touched the wound. "The human soldier who gave me this was skilled. I was simply more skilled." Sebastian glanced up at her face. "You killed him." "No." She held his gaze steadily. "I disarmed him and left him breathing. That is why my clan hunts me now. That is why I came to your door instead of theirs." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Sebastian returned his attention to the wound, processing what she had told him. An orc who showed mercy to a human enemy would be considered a traitor by many clans, particularly those still fighting in the border wars. No wonder she had looked so desperate. "This will hurt," he warned, reaching for the whiskey bottle. "But it needs to be cleaned properly, or infection will kill you where the sword did not." Petra set her jaw and nodded. When the alcohol hit the wound, she made no sound, but her hands gripped the arms of the chair hard enough that her knuckles went pale green. Sebastian worked as quickly as he could, flushing the cut thoroughly before threading his needle. "I will try to make the stitches neat," he said. "But I am a farmer and a former soldier, not a healer." "You are doing more than anyone else would have," Petra replied, her voice tight with pain. "A human who does not kill an orc on sight is already a rare thing. One who tends her wounds is unheard of." Sebastian began stitching, his hands steady from years of mending everything from torn clothes to injured livestock. "I have seen enough killing," he said quietly. 5 years in the border wars taught me that there is usually more honor in mercy than in the sword. Your people do not share that belief. Neither do yours, from what you have told me." Petra was silent at that, and Sebastian focused on his work. The stitches were indeed not as neat as a trained healer might have made them, but they were secure and even. He tied off the last one and sat back, wiping his hands on a clean cloth. "Done," he announced. "I will wrap it now, and then you need to rest. You have lost a good amount of blood." He wound clean linen bandages around her torso, trying not to notice the hard muscle of her stomach or the warmth of her skin beneath his hands. She was a warrior, that much was clear from her build, strong and solid in a way that spoke of years of training and fighting. "Thank you," Petra said when he had finished, the words awkward in her mouth as though she was unaccustomed to saying them. "I owe you a debt, Sebastian York." "You owe me nothing," Sebastian replied, standing and moving back to the pot of stew that was still simmering over the fire. "But you can share my meal if you are hungry. It is not much, just rabbit and vegetables, but it is hot and filling." He ladled stew into 2 wooden bowls and brought them to the table, settling into the chair across from Petra. She took the bowl with both hands, looking down at it as though she could not quite believe it was being offered. "You are not afraid I will attack you?" she asked, those amber eyes rising to meet his again. "Or that I will steal from you while you sleep?" Sebastian shook his head. "If you meant me harm, you would not have laid your sword at my feet. And if you meant to steal, you would have done so and left already. You came here because you had nowhere else to go, and I will not turn away someone in need, regardless of what skin they were born in." Petra studied him for a long moment, and Sebastian found himself wondering what she saw. He was 32 years old, with brown hair going gray at the temples, and the scars of old battles marking his arms and face. He was tall for a human, but still shorter than Petra by a few inches. He kept himself in decent shape through farm work, but he was not the soldier he had once been. "You are a strange human, Sebastian York," Petra said finally, and then she lifted the bowl to her lips and drank deeply of the stew. They ate in silence, but it was not an uncomfortable one. The fire crackled in the hearth, and outside the small farmhouse, the evening was settling into full darkness. When they had finished eating, Sebastian showed Petra to the small guest room he kept for the rare traveler who passed through this remote part of the frontier. "The bed is clean and there are extra blankets in the chest if you need them," he said from the doorway. "Rest. Your body needs time to heal." Petra sat on the edge of the bed, her sword laid across her lap, and looked up at him. "Why?" she asked simply. "Why do you help me?" Sebastian leaned against the doorframe, considering the question. "Because someone should," he said at last. "Because I have been cold and bleeding and desperate before, and I know what it means when someone offers kindness instead of cruelty. Sleep, Petra. We can talk more in the morning." He left her there, closing the door gently behind him, and returned to the main room of the farmhouse. It was only then, as he banked the fire and prepared for his own bed, that he allowed himself to fully consider what he had done. Harboring an orc fugitive, even one injured and alone, could bring trouble down on his head. If her clan came looking, or if any humans discovered her presence, there would be consequences. But as he lay in his own bed that night, staring up at the dark ceiling, Sebastian found that he did not regret his choice. He had meant what he said about seeing enough killing. The wars had taken too much from too many people, human and orc alike. If he could offer one small gesture of peace in his corner of the world, he would do so. Consequences be damned. Morning came with pale sunlight filtering through the windows. Sebastian rose early, as was his habit, and went about his morning chores. The chickens needed feeding, the cow needed milking, and there were always repairs to be made around a farm. He was mending a section of fence when he heard the door of the farmhouse open and turned to see Petra standing in the doorway. She had found the spare clothes he had left outside her door, a simple shirt and trousers that had belonged to him and were now loose on her frame despite her muscular build. Her sword was belted at her waist, and she moved carefully, one hand pressed lightly against her bandaged side. "You should be resting," Sebastian called out, setting down his hammer. Petra walked toward him, her steps measured. "I have rested enough. A warrior does not lie abed when there is work to be done. You are injured." "I have been injured before. It heals." She stopped beside the fence and looked out over his small farm. The fields were tidy, the crops growing well, everything maintained with clear care and attention. "You do all this work alone," Sebastian nodded. "I prefer it that way. Solitude suits me after the noise of war." "I understand that," Petra said quietly. They stood in silence for a moment, and then she asked, "What can I do to help?" "Nothing. You are a guest and you need to heal." "I am a burden," Petra corrected. "And I will not remain one. Give me a task, Sebastian York, or I will find one myself." There was steel in her voice, pride that would not accept charity without giving something in return. Sebastian recognized it because he had felt the same way many times in his life. He considered, then gestured to a pile of logs near the barn. "The wood needs splitting for winter. It is work that can be done sitting down if your side pains you." Petra nodded once and walked to the wood pile. Sebastian watched her settle onto the chopping stump, position a log, and swing the axe with practiced ease. Even injured, her form was perfect, each strike landing exactly where she intended. He returned to his fence mending, but his attention kept drifting back to her. They worked through the morning, not speaking but somehow comfortable in each other's presence. Around midday, Sebastian went inside and made a simple meal of bread, cheese, and cold meat. He brought it out to the yard and they sat together in the shade of the barn, eating and watching the clouds drift across the summer sky. "How long have you been here?" Petra asked, breaking the silence. "On this farm, 3 years," Sebastian replied. "I bought it with my soldier's pay after I left the army. It needed work, but that suited me. Gave me something to focus on besides the memories." Petra nodded slowly. "The memories of war do not fade easily. No, they do not." Sebastian looked at her. "How long have you been fighting?" "Since I was 14 summers old. It is the way of my clan. All children train from the time they can hold a weapon, and at 14 we are considered adults and join the war parties." She paused, her gaze distant. "I was good at it." "Fighting, I mean. I rose quickly through the ranks. By 18 I was leading my own unit. And now you are 20 and running from your own people because you chose mercy over killing." Sebastian shook his head. "The world makes no sense sometimes." "No," Petra agreed. "It does not." They finished their meal and returned to work. Over the following days, a pattern emerged. Sebastian would wake early and do the chores that required more mobility while Petra rested. By mid-morning, she would emerge and find tasks she could manage despite her healing wound. They would work through the day, eat together, and in the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk. Sebastian learned that Petra had never known her father, that her mother had died in a raid when she was 12, that she had been raised by the clan collectively, as was the orcish way. She had 2 younger brothers who were still with the Iron Ridge clan, and she worried about what would happen to them now that she had been branded a traitor. Petra learned that Sebastian had grown up in a small village, the son of a blacksmith, that he had joined the army at 17 to escape a future he did not want, and that he had seen things in the war that still haunted his dreams. He had no family left. His parents had died from fever while he was away fighting, and he had no siblings. "We are both alone then," Petra observed one evening as they sat watching the fire. 2 weeks had passed since she had arrived on his doorstep, and her wound was healing well, the stitches already removed and the scar forming neatly. "I suppose we are," Sebastian agreed. Then, after a pause, "though perhaps less alone than we were." Petra looked at him, and something in her expression made Sebastian's breath catch. She was beautiful, he realized, in a way he had not let himself acknowledge before. Not in the delicate manner that human society prized, but in the strength of her features, the intelligence in her amber eyes, the quiet dignity with which she carried herself. "Sebastian," she said slowly, "what happens when I am fully healed? Where do I go?" It was the question he had been avoiding thinking about. "You could stay," he heard himself say, "if you wanted. There is always work on a farm and I could use the help. Your neighbors will notice. Word will spread that you harbor an orc." "My nearest neighbor is a half-day's ride away, and he minds his own business as I mind mine. And if word does spread, we will deal with it when the time comes." Petra shook her head. "You do not understand what you risk. If my clan finds me, they will kill you for giving me shelter. If humans discover me here, they will brand you a traitor and probably hang you. I have brought danger to your door, Sebastian York." "Then let it come," Sebastian said, surprising himself with the vehemence in his voice. "I am tired of living in fear. Fear of the past, fear of the future, fear of what might happen if I actually try to build something meaningful instead of just surviving day to day. You said you owe me a debt. If that is true, then stay. Help me work this farm. Share this life I am building. That is how you can repay me." Petra stared at him, and in the firelight, her green skin seemed to glow. "You do not know what you are asking." "I know exactly what I am asking. I am asking you to stay because I do not want you to leave, because these past 2 weeks have been the least lonely I have felt in 3 years. Because when I look at you, I do not see an orc or an enemy or a monster. I see Petra, a warrior with honor who chose mercy over hate, and I would very much like to know her better." The silence that followed was profound. Sebastian could hear his own heart beating, loud in his ears. He had said too much, revealed too much, and he braced himself for rejection. Instead, Petra reached out slowly and took his hand in hers. Her palm was calloused from years of gripping a sword hilt, warm and solid against his skin. "I will stay," she said quietly. "For now, I will stay." The summer deepened into full bloom around the farm. Petra's strength returned completely, and she threw herself into the work with an intensity that sometimes worried Sebastian. She was up before dawn, working until long after sunset, as though trying to prove her worth through sheer determination. "You do not have to work yourself to exhaustion," Sebastian told her one evening as she came in from the fields, her shirt soaked with sweat. "I did not ask you to stay so you could kill yourself with labor." Petra set down the bucket of vegetables she had harvested and looked at him. "I know. But if I am not working, I am thinking, and my thoughts are not pleasant company." Sebastian understood that feeling all too well. "Then let us think together instead," he suggested. "Come, sit. Tell me what troubles you." They sat at the kitchen table, and Petra was silent for a long moment, staring at her hands. "My brothers," she said finally. "Torak and Gren. They are only 16 and 14. I raised them after our mother died. I taught Torak to fight, helped him prepare for his first war party. I was there when Gren had his tusk ceremony. And now I am here, safe and fed and healing while they face consequences for my actions." "What consequences?" Sebastian asked gently. In orcish culture, family shares the honor and shame of each member. "My choice to spare that human soldier, my flight from the clan, all of it reflects on them. They will be watched, questioned, possibly punished, and there is nothing I can do to help them." Sebastian reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "You did what your conscience demanded. That is not something to feel ashamed of. My conscience may have cost my brothers their futures. Or your example may have shown them that there is another way to live beyond endless fighting." Sebastian squeezed her hand gently. "You cannot know what seeds you have planted. Perhaps your brothers will remember that their sister chose mercy, and perhaps one day they will make the same choice." Petra looked up at him, her amber eyes shining with unshed tears. "You always know what to say to ease my heart. Not always, but I try." She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his, and they sat like that in the gathering twilight, holding hands across the kitchen table like the most natural thing in the world. As summer turned slowly toward autumn, the connection between them deepened. There were small moments of casual intimacy. Sebastian's hand at the small of Petra's back as he passed her in the kitchen. Petra adjusting the collar of Sebastian's shirt before he went into town for supplies. The comfortable way they worked side by side in the fields without needing to speak. But there was also restraint, a careful distance maintained even as they grew closer. Sebastian was acutely aware of the complexity of the situation. Petra was a refugee, dependent on his hospitality, and he would not abuse that position by making advances she might feel obligated to accept. And Petra, for her part, seemed to carry her own reservations, a wariness that Sebastian respected even if he did not fully understand it. The first real test came on a warm September afternoon when Sebastian returned from town with supplies and found Petra standing in the yard, sword drawn, facing 3 orcish warriors. Sebastian's blood ran cold. The orcs were all male, tall and powerfully built, wearing the dark leather armor marked with the symbols of the Iron Ridge clan. They had not drawn their weapons, but the tension in the air was palpable. "Petra," said the one in the center, his voice a deep rumble. You shame us by hiding here among humans. I shame myself by choosing my own path, Torak, Petra replied, and Sebastian realized with a jolt that this was her brother. Since when is that a crime? Since your path led you to betray everything our clan stands for. Torak's green face was hard with anger, but Sebastian could see pain beneath it. You were our finest warrior, Petra. Mother died proud of you. And now you throw it all away for what? Sympathy for our enemies. They are not our enemies if we choose to stop fighting, Petra said steadily. The war has gone on for generations, Torak. It will continue for generations more unless someone has the courage to step away. Courage, one of the other warriors spat. You speak of courage while hiding behind a human's walls. Sebastian had heard enough. He stepped forward, keeping his hands visible and empty. She is not hiding. She is healing, and she is welcome here as long as she wishes to stay. The three orcish warriors turned their attention to him, and Sebastian felt the weight of their gazes. Up close, they were even more imposing, each one easily half a foot taller than him and twice as broad. The human speaks, said the third warrior with clear disdain. Does your pet know you teach it tricks, Petra? Enough grin, Torak snapped, and Sebastian realized this younger warrior was Petra's other brother. Sebastian York, I presume? The human who took in my sister. I am Sebastian York, he confirmed. And yes, I offered Petra shelter when she needed it, as any person of honor would do. Honor. Torak's laugh was bitter. You know nothing of orcish honor, human. Perhaps not, Sebastian agreed. But I know that your sister chose mercy when she could have chosen killing, and I know that took more courage than any amount of fighting could. I know she has worked herself near to collapse on this farm rather than be a burden. I know she worries about you and Gren every day, wondering if you are well, if you are safe. That sounds like honor to me. Torak's expression flickered, surprise breaking through the anger for just a moment. He looked at Petra. Is this true? You worry for us? Every moment, Petra said softly. You are my brothers. That does not change just because I left the clan. Then come back, Torak said urgently, taking a step toward her. Come home, Petra. The elders are angry, yes, but we can work through it. Do penance, prove your loyalty again. We need you, I need you. Petra's hand tightened on her sword hilt, but she did not lower the blade. And the next time we face humans in battle, what then, Torak? Do I kill them to prove my loyalty? Do I become the thing I no longer wish to be? You become what you were always meant to be. A warrior of the Iron Ridge, a leader of our people. I am still a warrior, Petra said quietly. But I choose what I fight for now, and I choose who I stand with. She shifted her position slightly, moving to stand beside Sebastian rather than in front of him, a small gesture that nonetheless spoke volumes. Torak saw it and his face darkened. You choose him. A human. I choose a life that does not revolve around killing. If that means I stand with Sebastian, then yes, I choose him. The third warrior, the one who had spoken earlier, reached for his weapon. This is intolerable. We should drag her back by force. Try it, and you will have to go through me, Sebastian said, his voice hard with the authority of a man who had commanded soldiers in battle. I may be smaller than you, but I promise I will make you earn every inch. Torak held up a hand, stopping the other warrior. No. There has been enough violence. He looked at Petra with something like anguish in his eyes. Is there nothing I can say to change your mind, sister? I am sorry, Torak, but no, this is where I belong now. For a long moment, the tableau held, the five of them standing in the farmyard while the afternoon sun beat down. Then Torak sheathed his weapon and his companions followed suit. Then you are truly lost to us, Torak said, and his voice broke slightly on the words. The elders will declare you clanless. You will have no people, no heritage, no identity beyond what you make for yourself. I know, Petra said. I accept that. Torak looked at Sebastian. You take on a great burden, human. An orc without a clan is a dangerous thing, lost and angry. Can you handle what she may become? I will stand beside her regardless of what she becomes, Sebastian replied. That is what you do for people you care about. Something shifted in Torak's expression, understanding dawning. I see. It is like that then. He shook his head slowly. You are both fools. This will end in tragedy for one or both of you. Perhaps, Petra said, or perhaps we will prove that there is another way. Torak stepped forward and did something that surprised Sebastian. He reached out and gripped Petra's shoulder in a warrior's farewell. I hope you are right, sister. For your sake I truly do, but I cannot stand with you in this. The clan is my life as it was yours. I understand, Petra said, and her voice was thick with emotion. Keep Gren safe, Torak. Do not let him become so hardened by war that he loses his heart. I will try. Torak released her shoulder and stepped back. Farewell, Petra Kendrick. May you find whatever peace you seek. He turned and walked away, the other two warriors following. Gren looked back once, his young face confused and hurt, but he did not speak. They disappeared into the trees at the edge of Sebastian's property, and then they were gone. Petra stood motionless, her sword still raised until they were completely out of sight. Then, slowly, she lowered the blade and turned to Sebastian. Her face was composed, but he could see the tears tracking down her green cheeks. I am clanless, she said, as though testing the words. For the first time in my life, I belong to nothing and no one. Sebastian stepped close to her, close enough that he had to tilt his head back to look into her eyes. You belong here, he said firmly. You belong with me if you want that. You are not alone, Petra. Not anymore. The tears came harder then, and Petra made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. She dropped her sword and wrapped her arms around Sebastian, pulling him into a fierce embrace. He held her while she cried, feeling the strength in her body and the vulnerability in her tears, and he knew with absolute certainty that he would do anything to protect her. When the storm of emotion had passed, Petra pulled back slightly, wiping at her eyes. I am sorry. Warriors do not weep. Everyone weeps when they lose their family, Sebastian said gently. It is not weakness. It is proof that you love them. Petra nodded slowly, then bent and retrieved her sword. She looked at it for a long moment, then at Sebastian. When I laid this at your feet that first night, I thought I was surrendering, but you gave it back to me. You told me to keep my honor. And you have, Sebastian said, every day since. I want you to know something, Petra said, meeting his eyes. What I told Torak about choosing to stand with you, I meant it. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because this is where I want to be. With you, here on this farm, building something that matters more than war. Sebastian felt his heart begin to race. Petra, I need to be certain I understand what you are saying. I am saying that somewhere between you stitching my wound and us sitting by the fire talking until dawn, I began to care for you in a way that goes beyond gratitude or friendship. She took a breath, squaring her shoulders as though preparing for battle. I am saying that I have feelings for you, Sebastian York, and I needed you to know that before we go any further down this road together. The world seemed to narrow down to just the two of them, standing in the farmyard with the autumn sun painting everything gold. Sebastian had imagined this moment 100 times over the past weeks, but now that it was here, he found himself momentarily at a loss for words. I care for you too, he said finally, the words feeling inadequate for the depth of what he felt. From the moment you walked through my door, bloody and brave and desperate, something in me recognized something in you. I have been trying to be patient, to give you space to heal and to figure out what you wanted. But the truth is, I fall a little more in love with you every day. Petra's eyes widened. Love? Is that so hard to believe? I am an orc. You are human. We are different in every way that matters to the world. You are a person. I am a person. We are the same in every way that matters to me. Sebastian reached up and cupped her face gently in his hands, feeling the warmth of her skin, the slight roughness of the scar on her cheek. I love you, Petra. Not despite what you are, but because of who you are. And if you will have me, I would like to spend my life showing you just how much. For answer, Petra bent down and kissed him. It was tentative at first, uncertain, as though neither of them quite knew how to navigate the physical differences between them. But then, Sebastian's hands slid into her hair and Petra's arms wrapped around his waist, and everything else fell away except the taste of her lips and the feel of her body pressed against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Petra rested her forehead against his. I love you too, she whispered. I did not think I could, did not think I was capable of it after so many years of war, but you taught me that there is more to life than fighting and surviving. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the fading afternoon light, and Sebastian felt a peace settle over him that he had not known in years. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The autumn passed in a haze of work and happiness. Sebastian and Petra harvested the crops, preserved food for winter, and made repairs to the farmhouse and barn. But they also found time for stolen kisses in the fields, for long evenings talking by the fire, for the simple joy of falling asleep beside each other and waking to see the other's face. It was not without its difficulties. There were moments when the differences between them created misunderstandings, when orcish directness clashed with human subtlety, or when cultural assumptions led to confusion. But they worked through each problem with patience and communication, learning each other's ways and building something new that belonged to neither culture, but to both of them. Winter came early that year, sweeping down from the mountains with ice and snow. Sebastian and Petra spent the long dark evenings inside, and Sebastian taught Petra to read and write the human tongue, something she had never learned in her clan. In return, Petra taught him the orcish language and told him stories of her people's history and traditions. We are not monsters, she said one night as they lay in bed, her head resting on his chest. No matter what the stories say. We love and laugh and dream just as humans do. We feel fear and hope and sorrow. The difference is that we have been at war so long that many of us have forgotten how to be anything other than warriors. But you remembered, Sebastian said, running his fingers through her hair. Or maybe you discovered it for the first time. Either way, you chose something better. We chose something better, Petra corrected. I could not have done this alone. The winter deepened, and with it came an unexpected visitor. Sebastian was in the barn tending to the animals one gray February morning when he heard Petra call out a warning from the house. He grabbed the pitchfork and ran outside, only to find a young orc, barely more than a boy, standing in the snow. It was Gren, Petra's younger brother. He looked half frozen, his lips blue and his hands shaking as he clutched a pack to his chest. When he saw Sebastian, he dropped to his knees in the snow. Please, he gasped out, I have nowhere else to go. Petra emerged from the house, her sword at her side, but when she saw who it was, she ran forward. Gren, what happened? The clan, Gren said through chattering teeth. They found out I was questioning the elders, asking why we had to keep fighting. Torak tried to defend me, but they called me corrupted by your influence. They were going to send me to the front lines as punishment, to die in battle or prove my loyalty through blood. I ran instead. Sebastian and Petra exchanged a glance, then Sebastian moved forward and helped the young orc to his feet. Inside, quickly, before you freeze to death. They brought Gren into the warm farmhouse and sat him by the fire. Petra brought blankets while Sebastian made hot soup. Slowly, warmth and color returned to Gren's face, and he looked between his sister and the human man with wonder. "The clan said you had been seduced by human trickery," Gren said to Petra. "That you had been enslaved or enchanted, but I see now that was a lie. You are happy here." "I am," Petra confirmed, "happier than I have ever been." Gren looked at Sebastian. "And you truly care for my sister." "I love her," Sebastian said simply, "more than I can put into words." The young orc was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then he said, "I do not want to go back. I do not want to spend my life fighting a war that has no end and no purpose beyond itself. But I do not know how to be anything other than what I was raised to be." "You learn," Petra said, sitting beside her brother and taking his hand. "Sebastian and I will teach you, just as we are teaching each other. It will not be easy, Gren. You will have moments of doubt and fear, but it is possible to build a life that is not defined by violence." "Can I stay?" Gren asked, looking between them. "I will work hard. I will earn my keep. I just need somewhere to be while I figure out what kind of person I want to become." Sebastian smiled. "Of course you can stay. We have a spare room, and as Petra can attest, there is always more work than two people can handle on a farm. You are welcome here, Gren, for as long as you need." Gren's face crumpled with relief, and Petra pulled him into a hug, murmuring reassurances in their native orcish tongue. Sebastian watched them and felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the fire. His small farm was becoming a refuge, a place where those who wanted something different from life could find it. Over the following weeks, Gren settled into the rhythm of farm life. He was strong and willing, if inexperienced with agricultural work, and he learned quickly. Sebastian found himself enjoying the role of teacher, showing the young orc how to care for animals, mend fences, and prepare fields for spring planting. But it was Petra who did the most important teaching. She helped Gren understand that walking away from the clan did not mean abandoning his identity as an orc, that he could honor his heritage while choosing his own path. She taught him that strength came in many forms, not just skill with a blade. One evening in early March, as the three of them sat around the dinner table, Gren looked at Sebastian and Petra and said, "You two should marry." Sebastian choked on his water and Petra stared at her brother. "What?" "Marry," Gren repeated, as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Is that not what humans do when they love each other? And in orcish culture, a couple who shares a home and a life is considered bonded. You are already acting as though you are married. You should make it official." Sebastian and Petra looked at each other across the table. They had not discussed marriage, had been content to simply live each day as it came without putting names or labels on their relationship. But now that Gren had said it aloud, Sebastian found the idea taking root in his mind. "Would you want that?" he asked Petra softly. "To marry me?" Petra's amber eyes were wide and uncertain. "I do not know what a human marriage involves, and I am clanless. I have no family to negotiate a bonding contract, no elders to oversee the ritual." "We would create our own ritual," Sebastian said, the idea taking shape as he spoke. "Something that honors both of our traditions, that acknowledges what we are building together, something that is just ours." "Yes," Petra said, and her voice was firm with sudden certainty. "Yes, I want that. I want to marry you, Sebastian York, in whatever way we can create together." Sebastian felt a grin spreading across his face, joy bubbling up in his chest. He stood and walked around the table, taking Petra's hands and pulling her to her feet. "Then we will marry. Gren can serve as witness for the orcish side, and we will ride to town and ask the priest to perform the human ceremony. We will bind our lives together in every way that matters." Petra cupped his face in her hands and kissed him deeply, and when they broke apart, both were laughing. Gren watched them with a smile, looking pleased with himself for having suggested it. They married on a bright spring morning in late March. The human priest in the nearby town was skeptical at first, but Sebastian's quiet determination and Petra's obvious devotion to each other won him over. He performed the ceremony in the small stone church, speaking the traditional words about love and commitment, while Sebastian and Petra held hands and made their vows to each other. Back at the farm, they performed the orcish bonding ritual. Gren had helped Petra remember the words and actions, and as the sun set, they stood in the farmyard while Petra bound a length of leather cord around their joined wrists, symbolizing the binding of their lives. Sebastian spoke the orcish phrases that Petra had taught him, promising to stand with her in battle and in peace, in plenty and in want, until death released them. When it was done, Gren stepped forward and placed his hands over their bound wrists. "I witness this bonding," he said formally. "May your union be strong and your lives be long." They celebrated with a simple feast that evening, just the three of them, and as Sebastian looked at his new wife and her brother, his family by choice if not by blood, he felt a contentment deeper than anything he had ever known. The spring unfolded into summer, and life on the farm took on a new rhythm. Sebastian and Petra worked side by side, planting crops and tending livestock, while Gren grew stronger and more confident in his new life. The young orc was finding his way, discovering interests beyond fighting. He showed a particular aptitude for working with wood, and Sebastian helped him set up a small workshop in the barn where he could practice carving and crafting. But peace, Sebastian knew from experience, was always fragile on the frontier. The trouble came in late June when Sebastian made his monthly trip to town for supplies. He took the wagon, planning to pick up flour, salt, sugar, and a few other necessities they could not produce on the farm. The trip was usually uneventful, but this time, as he guided the wagon down the main street, he noticed people staring at him with open hostility. He stopped at the general store and went inside, only to find the proprietor, a man named Marcus who he had always been on friendly terms with, looking at him with cold eyes. "I need supplies," Sebastian said, setting his list on the counter. Marcus did not pick it up. "I cannot sell to you." "What? Why not? Word has spread about what you are doing out at your farm, harboring orcs. Some say you have even taken one as a wife." Marcus's lip curled. "I will not supply goods to a traitor." Sebastian felt ice forming in his stomach. "I am not a traitor. I am simply a man trying to live in peace. Peace with monsters is not peace. It is collaboration with the enemy." Marcus crossed his arms. "You should leave, York. You are not welcome in this town anymore." Sebastian looked around the store and saw other customers nodding agreement. He realized with a sinking heart that arguing would do no good. Prejudice ran too deep, had been cultivated by too many years of war. Without another word, he turned and left the store. He drove the wagon back to the farm empty-handed, his mind racing. If the town had turned against him, that meant danger for Petra and Gren. It meant potential violence, a mob showing up at his door demanding he turn over the orcs or worse. When he reached the farm and told Petra and Gren what had happened, Petra's face hardened. "I will not run again," she said firmly. "I am done running." "I am not asking you to run," Sebastian replied, "but we need to be prepared. If trouble comes, we will face it together, but we will be smart about it." They spent the next several days preparing. Sebastian cleaned and loaded his old military rifle and his pistol, weapons he had hoped never to use again. Petra and Gren sharpened their swords and practiced their forms in the yard. They stored extra food and water inside the house, and made sure they could barricade the doors and windows if needed. The attack came on a hot July evening. Sebastian saw the torches first, a line of lights moving through the twilight toward his farm. He counted at least 20 men, some on horses, all armed. "Inside," he ordered Petra and Gren. "Now." They barricaded themselves in the farmhouse, and Sebastian positioned himself at the window with his rifle while Petra and Gren took up positions with their bows. The mob stopped at the edge of the property, and a man on horseback rode forward. Sebastian recognized him as the mayor of the nearby town, a portly man named Aldrich Sutherland. "Sebastian York," Mayor Sutherland called out. "You have been declared an enemy of humanity for your collaboration with orc savages. Surrender the orcs you harbor, and you will be spared. Refuse, and we will take them by force and burn your farm to the ground." Sebastian's hands tightened on his rifle. He looked at Petra and Gren, saw the fear in Gren's young face and the fierce determination in Petra's eyes. Then he turned back to the window and called out, "The people in my home are under my protection. They have harmed no one and committed no crimes. If you want them, you will have to come through me." "So be it," Mayor Sutherland said, and the mob began to advance. Sebastian fired a warning shot into the air, and the mob stopped. "The next shot will not be a warning," he shouted. "I am a decorated veteran of the border wars. I can drop 5 of you before you reach my door. Think carefully about whether this is worth dying for." There was uncertainty in the mob now, men looking at each other and shifting nervously. But then someone threw a torch, and it landed on the roof of the barn. Within moments, the dry wood was ablaze. "No," Gren cried out. "The animals are in there." Before Sebastian could stop him, the young orc burst out the back door of the farmhouse and ran toward the burning barn. Petra cursed and followed, and Sebastian had no choice but to provide covering fire as they ran. The mob saw the orcs and charged. Sebastian fired his rifle methodically, aiming for legs and arms, wounding rather than killing but making each shot count. He dropped 3 men before they reached the barn, buying precious seconds for Petra and Gren to get the animals out. Then his rifle clicked empty, and he had no time to reload. Sebastian grabbed his pistol and ran out the front door, charging into the mass of men. He fought with the desperate fury of a man protecting everything he loved, using fists and elbows and the butt of his pistol to knock men down. He saw Petra emerge from the barn with the cow and the 2 horses, saw Gren herding the chickens to safety. The barn was fully engulfed now, flames reaching toward the sky, and the heat was intense. A fist caught Sebastian in the jaw, and he went down hard. Rough hands grabbed him, hauling him to his feet, and he found himself held by 3 men while Mayor Sutherland approached. "You are a fool, York," the mayor said, raising his fist. The blow never landed. Petra appeared out of nowhere, her sword flashing in the firelight, and the men holding Sebastian scattered. She stood over him, her blade leveled at the mayor, and the fury in her eyes was terrifying. "You will not touch my husband," she said, her voice deadly calm. Gren appeared at her side, his own sword drawn. "And you will not burn our home." The mob had regrouped, surrounding them now, and Sebastian climbed to his feet, standing with his back to Petra's. They were outnumbered more than 6 to 1, and he knew they could not win this fight. But they would go down fighting. Then a voice rang out across the farmyard, clear and commanding. "Stop this at once." Everyone turned to see a figure approaching on horseback, flanked by half a dozen riders. As they came closer, Sebastian recognized the leader. It was Colonel Marcus Hartford, his former commanding officer from the border wars, a man Sebastian had served under for 3 years. Colonel Hartford rode into the circle of torchlight, his weathered face grim. He looked at the mob, at Sebastian and Petra and Gren, at the burning barn, and his expression darkened. "What is the meaning of this?" the colonel demanded. Mayor Sutherland stepped forward. "Colonel Hartford, this man has betrayed humanity by taking orcs into his home. We are simply enforcing the natural law." "The natural law?" Hartford's voice was cold with contempt. "You are a mob, burning a veteran's farm because you are too cowardly to fight actual battles but too stupid to live in peace." He turned to Sebastian. "York, are you well?" "Well enough, sir," Sebastian replied, "though my barn is a loss. I can see that." Hartford looked at Petra and Gren. "And these are the orcs you have supposedly been harboring, my wife and her brother," Sebastian said, emphasizing the first word. "They left their clan because they chose peace over war. They have harmed no one." Hartford studied Petra and Gren for a long moment, and Sebastian saw the calculation in the old soldier's eyes. Finally, Hartford nodded slowly. "The war is over," he said, and his words rang out across the farmyard. "As of 3 days ago, the human and orcish leaders signed a peace treaty. The fighting is done. And here before me, I see what that peace can look like. A human veteran and an orc warrior, married and building a life together. A young orc learning to farm instead of fight. This is not treason. This is the future." A murmur ran through the mob, confusion and doubt spreading. Mayor Sutherland shook his head. "Peace treaty or not, they are still monsters." "No," Colonel Hartford said firmly, "they are people. And this man is a veteran who served with honor for 5 years. He has earned the right to live as he chooses, with whomever he chooses. And if any of you have a problem with that, you will answer to me and my men." The colonel's hand rested on the pistol at his belt, and his riders did the same. The threat was clear. Slowly, reluctantly, the mob began to disperse, men drifting away into the darkness until only Mayor Sutherland remained. "This is not over," he said to Sebastian. "Yes, it is," Colonel Hartford replied. "Go home, Sutherland. And count yourself lucky I do not have you arrested for attempted murder and arson." The mayor glared but turned and walked away. When he was gone, Hartford dismounted and approached Sebastian, extending his hand. Sebastian shook it, feeling the strength in the colonel's grip. "Thank you, sir," Sebastian said. "You saved our lives." "I owed you at least that much. You saved mine more than once during the war." Hartford looked at Petra. "And I find I am curious about this wife of yours, an orc warrior who chose peace. That takes a rare kind of courage." Petra inclined her head. "I simply chose what felt right." "Then you have better instincts than most." Hartford smiled slightly. "The peace treaty is real, by the way. I was not lying about that. It will take time for people to accept it, for the hatred to fade, but the official fighting is done." Sebastian felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "That is the best news I have heard in years." They spent the next hour putting out the last of the flames and assessing the damage. The barn was a total loss, but the animals had all been saved, and the farmhouse was intact. Colonel Hartford and his men helped where they could, and before he left, the colonel pressed a pouch of coins into Sebastian's hand. "For rebuilding," he said. "Consider it back pay that was never properly dispersed. And York, I am glad you found something worth fighting for beyond the war." After the colonel and his men had ridden away, Sebastian, Petra, and Gren stood in the farmyard, looking at the smoking ruins of the barn. They were exhausted, bruised, and covered in soot, but they were alive and together. "We will rebuild," Sebastian said. "It will take work, but we will make this farm whole again." "Together," Petra added, taking his hand. "Together," Gren echoed, and so they did. Over the following months, with the peace treaty making it safer for orcs to be seen in human settlements, they were able to hire help with the rebuilding. Other orcs began to arrive. individuals and small families who had heard about the place where humans and orcs lived in peace. Some stayed only briefly before moving on, but others settled in the area, building homes on the nearby unclaimed land. Sebastian and Petra's farm became a symbol of what the peace could look like, a place where old enemies could become friends and neighbors. It was not always easy. There were still people like Mayor Sutherland who clung to their hatred, and there were orcs who viewed those who chose to live among humans as traitors. But slowly, steadily, things changed. A year after the night of the mob, Sebastian stood in the new barn, larger and sturdier than the old one, and looked around with satisfaction. Petra came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her chin on his shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how far we have come," Sebastian replied. "About how one choice, one moment of mercy led to all of this." "You mean when I laid my sword at your feet, and when I gave it back?" "Keep your honor," I said, "but the truth is, you gave me back mine. I had lost it somewhere in the war, buried it along with too many friends and too many regrets. You reminded me what it means to be a person of principle." Petra squeezed him tighter. "We saved each other then." "I suppose we did." They stood like that for a while, comfortable in the silence, until they heard Gren calling for them from the house. They walked back together, hand in hand, toward the home they had built and the life they had chosen. In the years that followed, Sebastian and Petra's farm flourished. They had children, 3 daughters who inherited their mother's green skin and their father's brown eyes, who grew up knowing no difference between orc and human beyond appearance. Gren eventually married a human woman he met in town, a widow with a good heart and a sharp mind, and they built a house on the neighboring plot of land. The peace held, though it was sometimes fragile. There were still conflicts, still moments of tension between the races. But there were also more and more people like Sebastian and Petra, people willing to build bridges instead of walls, to choose understanding over hatred. On a warm summer evening, many years after that night when an injured orc warrior had laid her sword at his feet, Sebastian sat on the porch of his farmhouse with Petra beside him. Their daughters were playing in the yard, their laughter ringing through the air, and in the distance, they could see the lights of Gren's house and the smoke from other neighboring farms, both human and orc. "You ever regret it?" Sebastian asked. "Giving up your clan, your old life?" Petra shook her head. "Not for a moment. I found something here worth more than any clan or any amount of glory in battle. I found love. I found peace. I found you." Sebastian took her hand, marveling as he always did at how perfectly her fingers fit between his despite the difference in size. "I love you, Petra." "And I love you, Sebastian," she smiled, her tusks catching the last light of the setting sun. "Thank you for keeping my honor that first night, and for helping me discover that honor can mean more than just being a warrior." "You taught me the same thing," Sebastian replied. "That honor means choosing what is right, even when it is hard, even when it costs you everything you thought you knew." They sat together as darkness fell, watching their daughters play and listening to the sounds of their farm settling into night. The peace was not perfect and the future was never certain, but they had each other, and they had built something beautiful out of the ashes of war. And that, Sebastian thought, was more than enough. The stars came out one by one, bright points of light in the darkening sky, and Sebastian and Petra remained on the porch, content in each other's presence, and in the life they had created together. A life that had started with a desperate gesture and a simple reply, with a sword laid down and a sword returned, with 4 words that had changed everything. "Keep your honor." And they had, both of them, in all the ways that mattered most.